And we have 72 matchups that are going to be happening in the 2026 FIFA World Cup group stage. Which ones are we going to bet on? I've got a top 10. I'm going to share it with you guys next on this special World Cup edition of To the Window. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Chris with the To the Window Sports Betting Podcast here. We're doing things a little bit differently to get ready for the World Cup today. And so we're taking a slightly different approach from what you may be used to with our podcast. So in today's episode, I want to walk you guys through why betting on the World Cup is different from most other footy or soccer matches you may bet on. And what are the factors you need to be keeping an eye for as you're looking at the market for odds of matches to engage with. And after putting all this stuff together, we've identified the 10 matchups in the group stage that we think have the most value for you as an interested bettor. And so the goal today, I'm going to give you all of the data. Jemiah is going to come in behind me on each of these matchups and tell you how the odds are looking. And that'll be our top 10 list. What you do with the information is up to you. So as always, before we get going, I want to remind you guys, your likes, your comments, your subscribes, everything you do to help us grow this channel is super beneficial. We say it every week on our podcast, truly mean it. So whether you engage in a limited capacity is better than no engagement at all. That'll help us get to 500 subscribers. It is a game changer for us with YouTube. If you can just take a second to click a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Jemiah and I really appreciate it. Thank you guys in advance. So now as we get into, there's 72 matches in the group stage. How do we figure out where the value is going to be? So first things first, let's talk about the stats you would normally review. And these are going to be the same regardless of whether you're talking World Cup, Champions League, Premier League, MLS, La Liga, Ligue 1, whatever. All these stats, when you hear predictions from experts for a match, are usually the kind of stats that they're talking about. So let's start there, because even when the World Cup's over, you'll have that knowledge to then take and use for future footy bets if you were so inclined. So first things first. And these stats, again, if you hear them from other podcasts or hear them on TV or read them in articles, now you're going to know what they're talking about. If you hear someone refer to XG, expected goals, I feel like that's straightforward. If a team has a higher XG number, they're putting the ball in the back of the net. Obviously, it means they're usually winning matches. That number is important. Likewise, expected goals against, or XGA, that tells you how good a team's defense is. If that number is lower, that tells you that, again, chances are they're a pretty solid team, at least at the back. And in these tournaments, it's not just about how much you're scoring. It's about how much you're not letting the other team score as well. Sounds simple, sounds stupid, but it is true. In addition to that, expected assist. How many chances are these teams creating? You know, if you're a team like Norway that has Erling Haaland, who's scoring a lot of goals, that's great. But how many assists are happening as well? How many chances is the team around Erling Haaland creating for him? It's great you have a finisher, but you can't score goals if the ball is not in front of the net, and that's usually going to come from those assists. And then the other stat to keep in mind here is a team's pressure percentage. How much is a team pressuring to get the ball back? And for those of you that aren't soccer fans, the simplest way I can think to break it down, if you're a basketball fan, and you think about a press on an inbounds play, it's the exact same thing. You press higher up the court, you hope to force a turnover in midcourt, you get the ball back. Chances are you have an easier chance at a basket at the other end. It is the same thing for soccer. So when a goalie has the ball and he kicks it to a defender, the more a team presses that defender, defenders usually aren't good with their feet, maybe a bad pass, create a turnover, chance for an expected assist, a chance for a shot on goal, and a chance for an expected goal as well. So that gives you a little bit of the, if there's any general takeaway for a new footy bettor or fan from this tournament, understanding those numbers are going to be super helpful to you as you look to make more knowledgeable decisions about these matchups. But in addition to those usual stats, we've got some other criteria that we need to run through, because for those who are not aware, North America is huge. And even though this looks like on paper a World Cup that is mostly happening in the United States, you've got teams that are going to be based in Canada and Mexico as well. So the first factor that I want to point out to people is, where are these teams going to be training? Where are these teams setting up? You have 42 countries that are setting up at colleges, at MLS clubs, at whatever facilities around the country to get ready to play these matchups. Where's home base for them? How are they acclimating? Are they in the bright lights of a big city? You have a lot of countries that have chosen to set up actually in Kansas City, so they're kind of off the beaten path a little bit. That affects your mindset going into a high pressure tournament like the World Cup. In addition to where a training camp is located, the thing that's also going to come out of where that training camp is located, and the second point to think about, is the amount of travel. Guys, there's going to be so much travel that's going to have to happen in this World Cup just to get to and from these matchups. And some teams are going to be traveling a real great distance. Others are barely going to travel at all. And for a lot of these players, these are going to be substantially longer distances, more times on a plane, more times where the legs are going to get beat up than they may be used to from playing in the Champions League in Europe or South America or in their domestic league. So to give a little bit of perspective here for you that are saying, oh, the travel may not be that big of a deal, I want to give some context. The longest flight, commercial flight, that is currently available in North America is a flight from Boston to Honolulu, Hawaii. That flight is 5,095 miles one way. That's 11 hours on an airplane. That's pretty much like me flying from Atlanta to Amsterdam. And to give you a sense of perspective, there are 11 teams, so about a quarter of the field in this tournament is going to be traveling a further distance than the longest commercial flight available just in the group stage. That is going to impact not just performance in the group stage, but performance in the matchups and the knockout rounds as well. So if you think travel is not an issue, and at the other extreme, you have 11 teams that have less than 2,000 miles of travel in the group stage. France doesn't leave the Northeast at all. Training in Boston, New York, Philly, and Boston is where their matchups are. 1,800 miles. They don't have to get on a plane if they don't want to. So if you don't think that travel is an advantage, again, you're being naive. It is definitely going to impact the way these matches play out. And then in addition to that, I've lumped these two together because depending on the location, temperature will be an issue in certain areas, and altitude is going to be an issue in certain areas. And even in preparing to share this content and talking to my partner Jemiah about this, I hope people understand that when matches are being played in Mexico, these aren't being played on the beach and they're not being played at sea level. All three of those locations in Mexico are at serious altitude. Mexico City is 7,200 feet up. It is a grind. It is absolutely going to crush fans who don't know what they're getting into. And I fully expect, regardless of preparation, the altitude is going to affect these players as well. And also, not exactly the shortest plane ride to get to these locations. Even if you have a camp in Miami or Houston or wherever, that still is a lot of time on the plane for adverse travel conditions. And then on the weather piece, hey, if you look out and you're playing in Canada, you're talking 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 15, 16, 17 degrees Celsius, comfortable matchup. But if you're playing in Miami, or if you're playing in any of these other locations on the East Coast where the humidity is going to be insane in these outdoor stadiums, fully expect that to be a factor as well. So I share all that with you to tell you from a statistical standpoint and from a logistical and environmental standpoint, what we're looking at today is putting all those factors together to give you the 10 matches that you should be looking at betting potentially in the 2026 FIFA World Cup group stage. So at number 10, the first matchup that we are considering betting strongly in the 2026 FIFA World Cup group stage is Croatia versus Panama. This is a Group L matchup. It is the third game of the group. This is a game based in Toronto, Canada. And the funny thing, so interesting thing about this on paper, if you're looking at some of the stats that I mentioned earlier, Croatia should absolutely destroy Panama on paper. You're talking they score more goals, they have more assists, they pressure a lot more. The biggest thing that could be a factor here for potential value, you might see some questionable odds coming in for Panama simply because of the travel schedule for Croatia. By the time Croatia plays this match, they will have logged 5,400 miles of travel time for the third game in their group. So I share that with you because if I'm looking at this matchup that is going to be happening, I'm really intrigued to see what our odds are going to look like for. I still think Croatia is going to win just based on quality alone, But I do think if you see some interesting numbers from the books, it's going to be because the books also see Croatia is potentially going to be tired, and we don't even know if this matchup will matter by the time they get to the third match of the group. But that said, I do expect Croatia to win this game. I think my gut says an over 1.5 goals, even over 2.5 potentially. Panama does not rate very highly on defense at all. They've been giving up a goal and a half a match for the last 18 months. And you've got Croatia scoring essentially a goal and a half every game. So I think between the two of them, we should be able to get there. But I'll let Jemiah tell you where the odds are, what the books are telling us, and if that is a matchup you think you should be taking to the window. At number 9, South Africa versus South Korea. This is this matchup is on June 24th. It is in Group A. It is also the third match of the group for both teams. This is a match that's going to be happening in Monterrey, Mexico. So think about what I shared with you earlier about the conditions here. The interesting thing about this is that this is why you need to be keeping an eye on the odds here. South Korea does not leave Mexico for the entire group stage. They are in Guadalajara and Monterrey the entire time. So they only travel 680 miles for the entire thing in the group. Whereas obviously South Africa, they're going to be coming in right around 4,200 miles of travel. And if you're looking at all of the stats that matter, like the numbers I mentioned earlier, South Korea is absolutely bodying South Africa in everything. Goals, assists, goals allowed, pressure, travel, everything to me points to if you're going to take a straight up winner in this one, it seems pretty clear. And I think the value in getting it is earlier rather than later. South Korea should really beat up on South Africa, with all due respect to our South African viewers. I fully imagine that they're going to get a win. I think they are going to get a clean sheet. I think that this is on paper, again, one of those I don't even know why they're playing the match, frankly. So South Korea, big over South Africa on June 24th in Monterrey, Mexico. At number 8, we have Turkey versus Paraguay. This matchup is on June 19th. This match is in Group D. It is the second match in Group D for both of these teams. This matchup will be played in San Francisco, so conditions not as much of a factor here, right? So the interesting thing about this is going to be Turkey is actually training in extreme heat. They're going to be training in Mesa, Arizona, I believe. So for them to train in heat and then come down to San Francisco, where it's going to be half that temperature and windy, I think it's going to be the most extreme temperature differential for Turkey. So while I expect them to be higher or conditioned better, I do think that there's going to be an acclimation period within that match for them, right? So both of these teams, though, from a stats standpoint, a goal a game scored, a goal a game given up, not a lot of assists. Pressure percentage is just over 50% for both. But Turkey's going to be logging 5,200 miles of travel before this matchup. Given the numbers where we're at, I think that looking at this matchup for Turkey and Paraguay, under 2.5 is a pretty good probability here. And I also think that if you wanted to explore a Paraguay win straight up, if the odds are worth it to you to go for it, go for it. But I feel really good about it under 2.5 based on all the factors, based on these teams' forms. That's where I think this one is going to go. And I'm going to take that one to the window. At number 7, Bosnia versus Qatar. This matchup is going to be on June 24th. This is the third match for both teams in Group B. This game's going to be played in Seattle, so conditions not really an issue there for either team. The interesting thing about this is going to be the effect that travel is going to have. Bosnia will be 7,400 miles of airfare in by the time this matchup is played. They are better on paper. There is no question. In every single statistical category that we are discussing today, they are crushing Qatar, or Qatar. I guess I can pronounce it both ways. But carrying the weight of that travel across that distance to that point, the thing that's going to be the most interesting to me is going to be really what form and what headspace is Bosnia going to be in when they get off that plane to play that match? Do I like Bosnia to win? If this was any better opponent, probably not. But because it's Qatar, because they give up a goal and a half a game, they're scoring a little less than a goal a game right now over the last 18 months. I'm going to take Bosnia. I'm leaning Bosnia to win this matchup, but I do think over 2.5. I think that both teams will stay true to what their stats are showing for their recent form. Qatar is going to give up some goals. At that point, realistically, they're not going to be playing for anything in this tournament anyway. They should have already lost to Canada and Switzerland. So I expect Bosnia to get a result. Over 2.5 will happen. Both teams will be done, or Qatar will be done, and then that'll be them getting back on the plane, heading back west from there. So that is your number 7 matchup for you to consider taking to the window as we get ready for the World Cup group stage. At number 6, we have finally a team of note. We have Germany versus the Ivory Coast. That's a fun matchup. That's going to be happening on June 20th. It is the second game of Group E for both teams. This one's going to be happening north of the border from me in the US, up there in Toronto, Canada. And this is going to be a fun one to consider because if you're talking about Germany and Ivory Coast to an outsider who knows nothing about football, you're saying Germany's going to win this one all the way. And in reviewing all the stats, yeah, they should win this all the way. They average close to 2 goals a game. They're barely giving up a goal a game right now. Expected assist are close to 1.5 a game. They pressure the ball like crazy. Ivory Coast does not pressure as much. This definitely, like on paper, this should be Germany all the way, right? The only reason to consider not betting Germany outright is simply because of the travel involved here. They will be 5,600 miles into their group stage journey. Really, or I guess it's 5,600 miles in full that they have within the group stage. So the question I have for Germany is they've got a lot of young guys who haven't been here before, some older players who have been through this experience before. I just hope that the travel grind doesn't wear down Germany's young stars, who, quite frankly, should score goals. So it's something to think about. But that said, as a very biased Liverpool fan who loves Florian Wirtz and wants to see the best for him, I think Germany does win this match. I think Germany scores more than 2 goals. I think that their pressure is going to force turnovers. I think they'll get a couple of relatively easy goals in this matchup. So for me, the result isn't so much in question. It's more of how much is Germany going to score. And if you see skepticism in the books, that is due to travel. So that is the number 6 matchup that we are looking at for the World Cup group stage. At number 5, another big hitter finally decides to join the lineup, and that is France versus Norway. Talked a little bit about Norway at the beginning of this episode. This is the 3rd match in Group I. Again, this is a matchup played in the northeastern U.S. I don't expect conditions to be an issue here. On paper, again, it's one of those things. This is actually closer on paper than people realize. Both these teams are scoring more than 2 goals a game. Funnily enough, no one is scoring more goals per game over the last 18 months than Norway. Erling Haaland factor. So he scored 16 goals in qualifying. He is the guy. And it doesn't matter who France has on defense, even though their defense is loaded. He's Erling freaking Haaland. He's one of the best players on the planet, right? So in that regard, you are seeing a bit of a split here again on goals. You were talking about Norway scoring more goals per game than France. France giving up less than a goal per game than Norway. Expected assists for both teams actually higher than I remembered them being. Both are talking about 1.5 assists per game. France pressures like crazy. 71% of the time they are trying to force a turnover here. Travel, not really an issue. Again, France only traveling 800 miles or 1,800 miles in the group stage. Norway is going to be at just over 3,000. The fascinating bet for me in this is going to be the over. Even though defensively you should be looking at about 2 goals, if you can get over 2.5 goals in France versus Norway, you got to do it because of the way France pressures the ball. Erling Haaland is a goal machine. So honestly, both teams to score over 2.5 goals in that matchup. And if you're feeling froggy, I could definitely see some value in potentially betting Norway to win this matchup. Um, you know, France, again, on paper, should they win? Yes. But if Erling Haaland is in the form of his life, as he's been known to do, France could definitely, this could be the group is already over. Who cares? We lose to Norway. We keep it moving. A theme that'll come up as I get into another matchup. Don't forget, guys, when Argentina won the World Cup in 2022, they lost a game in the group to Saudi Arabia on the way there. I do think the winner of this tournament will lose a game in the group. And I think if France is going to lose a game in their group, I think it is this match against Norway. Something to think about as you're taking your bets to the window. At number 4, we get to this one I love on paper. Morocco versus Brazil. This is the first game for both teams. It is going to be on June 13th. Again, first matchup of Group C. This is going to be up there in New Jersey/New York. It's really New Jersey, in MetLife Stadium. And this is an interesting one. Both of these teams played in the last World Cup, by the way. It was a 0-0 draw. And if you're looking at the numbers here, I definitely would tell you we're leaning the under again. Under 2.5 for both of these teams. Now, both teams, Brazil scoring a little less than 2 goals per game coming into this through qualifying. Morocco about 1.5 goals. But stringy defenses on both sides. Both teams giving up less than a match per game. Assist creation's high. Both teams pressure the ball about the same. Travel's not going to be an issue here because both teams are going to have time to settle in for the first match location from their East Coast-based training facilities. So for me, again, if I'm looking at this on paper, I think that a lot of naive bettors will come in and see Brazil and think this is old Brazil, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, all of the players we remember are going to be coming out of the woodwork. This is a different Brazil team under Carlo Ancelotti. And I think we're going to know really quickly a tough match to really figure out new system, new coach under the brightest lights, knowing Morocco only gives up 0.7 goals a game. For me, again, under 2.5 and a Morocco draw, no bet, or even a Morocco win, I could see as a potential here if there's some value. So look into those. I'll be curious to know what the books say as we get closer to that match starting off. But I do expect this to be not the most entertaining match in the world. And I think the score line and the bets you'll place will reflect that. So curious to see what Jemiah finds as he digs into the books as well. We only have 3 matchups left, guys. So again, one last reminder, please like, subscribe, share our content. Super, super beneficial for the channel. At number 3, and you're going to see a theme in these top 3 matchups. I want to see if you pick up on it before I call it out at the end. So at number 3, ooh, this is a really fun one. Portugal and Colombia. This will be the 3rd game of Group K for both teams, taking place on June 27th, and this will be at El Azteca, Mexico City. Altitude, 7,380 feet. By the time both of these teams get there for this last match, Colombia will have flown 5,400 miles. Portugal will have flown 6,200. These teams are going to be beat up by travel by the time they get there. If you're looking at stats on paper, Portugal scores goals almost 2 a game. Colombia is close, but not quite there. Both teams give up about a goal per game. Assist creation is a big thing for Portugal, also for Colombia as well. Natural playmakers in both teams. That's not surprising to see. They do pressure about 60% of the times. This is going to be an interesting one because if this was in any other location, like if this was going to be in Chicago or Toronto or anywhere on the West Coast where conditions aren't as crazy, where you're not at altitude, I would expect this to be a very open back and forth match because that's what the numbers say these teams are. Because of where this is being played, I don't know that I agree with that thought. I think that both teams will score. I think that you're going to get value in Colombia scoring. Portugal's defense being slightly better. I do think you'll get decent odds there for Colombia to score. But I definitely think that Colombia is going to have a little bit of advantage having been in the altitude a little bit longer than Portugal has. And so for that reason, I think that you've got to consider. My research tells me over 2.5, but my gut says unless this is a game that both teams need to win, if they need to win it, you're going over 2.5. If the group has sort of figured itself out at that point and both of these teams are sitting comfortably, I think under 2.5 is also worth considering. Tired legs are going to kick in, guys. Doesn't matter how deep these teams are. Even if you're sitting on a bench, 5,400 miles on an airplane is 5,400 miles on an airplane. So either way, explore that matchup. It is crazy fascinating to me. I can't wait to watch that one. And I have no doubt, like those fans traveling in to Mexico City, El Azteca is going to be a cauldron. It is going to be so lit for that match. Let's just hope the match that we get on June 27th reflects the atmosphere the fans should be creating. So that is your third matchup of the group stage to consider. As we get to our top two now, at number 2, the Czech Republic versus Mexico. June 24th, this is the third match of Group A for both teams. Guess where they're playing? El Azteca, Mexico City. So as we're looking at all of the factors here, again, both of these teams from a number standpoint, Mexico is better than the Czech Republic. That actually runs counterintuitive to my maybe Eurocentric football viewing tendencies, but Mexico scores 1.6 goals a game to 1.3 for the Czech Republic, and slightly less on goals allowed for Mexico than the Czech Republic. Assists per game, right around 1 for both. Both teams pressure the ball right around the same amount of time. The biggest thing that's going to be the issue here is going to be the Czech Republic are playing Mexico in Mexico at their home stadium. Again, you want to talk about sheer insanity. I don't know that assuming anyone is traveling to Mexico for that matchup from the Czech Republic, I don't know that even with the insanity of some of the club football you see in that part of the world in Europe, Azteca is different. It is such a factor. We see it from the US-Mexico matchups all the time. And when you combine that with the 5,800 miles that the Czech Republic will have traveled to the 480 miles that Mexico has traveled, the books are probably going to be leaning towards Mexico. And it makes sense. I have to be honest with you. This Mexico team is not as good as the Mexican teams that I grew up watching that were beating the U.S. of Chicharito, Carlos Vela, Chucky Lozano, Guantanamo Blanco, all these guys, Rafa Marquez, the craphead he was back in the day. This is not the same Mexico team. So while on paper they've played well over the last 18 months, Czech Republic's played well too. It should be tired legs. That Czech team is full of professional guys that have won at all levels. I fully expect them to show up. Do I know if they're going to win? I don't know right now. But I'm telling you, sitting here today at the time of filming, as we're about 3 weeks out from that matchup, I love an under in that game. I think that Mexico will be too excited, and I think that they will be a little sloppy in possession. I fully expect if Czech Republic just needs a draw in the third game, they're going to park the bus. They're going to have the bottles of piss and everything thrown at them, as happens in these matchups in El Azteca. They're going to get a point, and they're going to get out of there. So under 2.5 all day, every day. That's what I expect to happen. And again, it'll depend on if teams are vying for that third spot in the group. I do think those are the two teams are going to come out of that group, assuming there's no slip-ups along the way. Maybe they have to go for it. But again, I fully expect the altitude to be a factor there. Give me under 2.5, Czech Republic and Mexico, with your second of our top 10 matchups, or our number 2 best matchup to consider for the 2026 World Cup group stage. And the number one matchup for you to consider betting in the 2026 FIFA World Cup group stage: Spain versus Uruguay. This matchup is going to be on June 26th. It is a Group H matchup in Guadalajara, Mexico. So why is this number one? And it's Spain. I mean, Spain doesn't, and let's be clear, Spain have won 35 matches in a row. They won the Euros. They give up less than a goal a game. They're my pick to win the whole freaking thing. But if there is potential value in this game, it is from not just taking an under in this matchup. I do expect, if there's a game that Spain will lose, just like, again, Argentina lost to Saudi Arabia, I expect if there's a game for Spain to lose, it is this game. Now, the numbers, again, tell the story. Spain's better. Keep it short and simple. They score almost 2 goals a game. They hardly give up any goals. They press 75% of the time. Travel, they are going to be coming in from the U.S. They're training in Chattanooga, not far from me in Atlanta, which is at a little bit of altitude, but it's about a 3,500-mile flight in there. I do expect that to have a little bit of an issue with the legs there, especially as Uruguay is actually training in Playa del Carmen, so just outside of Cancun. I don't think they're going to be out of Mexico at that point. So while there's a little bit of travel for them, they're not leaving the country. They're going to be used to conditions a little bit. So I definitely think if you're going to get value of any of the matchups we've talked about today, we're going under 2.5. And I'm inclined to say, screw it, take Uruguay to win. Why not? If Messi can lose to freaking Saudi Arabia and still win a World Cup, why can't Lamine Yamal and the rest of the Spanish national team? So that's probably the spiciest take I have of the 10 matchups that we've identified so far. Guys, that's everything we have for the World Cup group stage. And if you didn't notice with those last 3 games, all of them in Mexico, all of them at altitude. Only 4 matchups on that list actually based here in the U.S., and all of them in slightly cooler conditions. Runs a little counterintuitive to our normal way of thinking, but again, the data tells a story, the conditions will tell a story, the travel will tell a story, and it's going to be fascinating to see how that narrative develops once the tournament starts on June 12th. So I really appreciate you guys joining us today. I want to thank Jemiah for jumping in here to give some meat on the bones to all of these different odds and where there's potential value right now in the market. Something we'll be continuing to watch. I would expect you guys will be continuing to watch it as well. And that is everything we have for you right now. I've got other World Cup stuff we'll share as we get closer, as far as where there is straight up value and upset potential. Not worried about conditions, any of that stuff. Let me keep digging into it. I'll come back to you guys with it. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to join us today, to learn about the World Cup, to see where there's value. And y'all look at those bets, look at those books, get them in, get them to the window. For Jemiah, I'm Chris from To The Window. We will catch you guys on the next one. Enjoy the World Cup, guys. We'll talk soon.